Good afternoon. I'm Chris Koetzle, the Executive Director here at the Association of Towns, and this is another edition of Talk of the Towns. We have a great guest with us today. You're going to be excited to hear from him. But before we get to our guest, I want to make sure you know where to find us, always on Spotify, Apple platform, and YouTube. Those are the three places you can find us. In all three of those places, if you can like, share, and subscribe, that helps us tremendously. Like, share, and subscribe. Our Nick tells us our subscriber base is growing pretty significantly, so I'm glad to hear that. Let's keep it going. Please make sure you're sharing this with your friends. We talk about all things towns, and today we have a very special guest. We're very excited to have him here at the Association of Towns. Comptroller Tom DiNapoli has joined us. Welcome, Comptroller. How are you?
Chris, it's great to be with you. Looking forward to the conversation.
Absolutely. First, let me just say what a great friend the Comptroller is to the association and to all municipal organizations and municipalities. We were just chatting, you've been at our annual meeting, how many years now?
Well, since 2007. It was the first event that I went to shortly after I was appointed state controller in 2007. So I always say going to your annual meeting is good luck because, and that's kind of the commitment I made going back to when Jeff had your position, Jeff Haber. I always feel that the Association of Towns brought me good luck from that very first meeting.
That's great. That's great. We really appreciate it. I'm not just saying this because you're here, but you are a fan favorite. Every time we get our reviews back, our surveys back, they love what you do, what you
nice
say.
to hear.
It's very interesting to them. Yeah. You talk about things that are so relevant to them, and so it's really something that's an institution, a staple at the annual meeting. So we appreciate it.
You know, and I'm sure we'll cover in our conversation, so much of the work of the Controller's Office has such a direct impact and involvement with local government. And you know, for me, I live in a town.
Yeah.
I grew up in an unincorporated area in the town of Northampton. I live in a village now, but still part of a town. So it's interesting. My first involvement in public service, first of all, began on the school board, but very quickly migrated to going to town board meetings. Mm-hmm. And I think, in fact, as you may recall from some of my chatting over the years at your meetings, I ran unsuccessfully for town office. I wasn't as successful as you.
Yes.
I never got to be supervisor, but
I remember.
I did run for town supervisor. Actually, I ran for town council once too when I was in college. So to me, municipal government is just so important. The town level is so very, very important. So I always say I didn't get elected to my town board, but I became state controller as a consolation prize.
And doing great ever since. Which you reminded me, been 18 years. Wow. Yeah. That's something. I do want to stop for a moment on the annual meeting. Registration is open. Early bird registration is open. This is the most affordable, easiest way to register for the annual meeting. Do it now before Halloween. October 31st is when we close early bird and go to regular registration. But go to our website. You'll find a draft agenda. We're getting ready for really a exciting school this year. So a little commercial on the annual meeting.
But I just want to pick up on that because I think it's so important. I know what happens sometimes. I remember one days when I was on the school board and we get invited to conferences, school board association events, that kind of thing. You know, and sometimes people say, well, you know, should we really spend the money on that? You know, a taxpayer is going to come to a meeting and say, why are we going to a conference in New York City or wherever it may be? And I would just say to your members and colleagues, especially for those maybe who have not participated in that annual gathering, you put on such a great program. It really is so informative, not just the speakers, but all the different sessions that you have. Obviously, a lot of our folks participate in those sessions. The booths that are there, you know, for all the different organizations, governmental and businesses that would have a role to play with towns and local governments. It really is a worthwhile investment of time and effort. So I would say, you know, to those of your members that have gone in the past, sign up again. But for those who maybe have not participated, new town board members, right, or new town officials, this is a great opportunity to really, really learn about resources that are available and make connections, networking. That's what it's all about.
Yeah, we tell people all the time when they talk about what it might cost you, right? Obviously, towns have to worry about the cost of things, but we always say you can't afford not to go.
Right.
Really.
That's a good way to put it.
What you're losing on not going is.
And I always say, if you're going to go back to your town board meeting and a taxpayer's going to say, well, how come you spent money on that? say the state controller said this is a worthy investment of resources,
I
because you're
will.
going to learn and be a better town official
I will.
because of your participation.
I will. And thank you and your staff for all the support, not just there, but the finance school we do. We have a strong relationship with our finance school every year. I don't want to call out certain people because I'll forget somebody, but I got to say Robin has been phenomenal to work with, and Dan Aquilano
Yeah,
has
Dan,
he's
Dan's
just,
been doing it for a long time. Robin is our deputy controller for
yes,
local government school
yeah,
district accountability, and she comes from local government. She
yep,
was the elected controller for Dutchess County, and I think that's given us added value because she knows very much what happens at the local level, and that sense of partnership. We do our audits, and I'm sure we'll talk about that. We have that accountability role, but we're also very clear that we want to be a partner. I would prefer that we give the information and the training so that when we come in and do an audit, there are no findings,
right,
right? I'd rather have, nothing come out of an audit. And the audits are always meant not to be a gotcha. They really are meant to help improve government operations, to help our local officials be even better. So that collaboration that we have with the Association of Towns and the other associations, with counties, with school districts, NICOM, for the villages and cities, that makes it easier for us to get to the elected officials and the appointed officials at the municipal level. Because when we do the training schools, it's in partnership with you,
right.
and you help to give us access to people that maybe wouldn't be aware about how to reach the controller's office. So we appreciate that collaboration immensely.
No, we appreciate it as well. You talked a little bit about your earlier career and some of the local government experience, but we mentioned 18 years in the comptroller's
Yeah,
office. So maybe a little bit talk about how you got there, because I think it was by an appointment first,
yeah,
and then you ran,
yeah,
and it's a 4-year term, obviously, so you're
yeah.
up every 4 years.
Every
But
4 years.
just
Yeah,
talk a little bit about
yeah.
your experience in becoming comptroller and as comptroller.
Well, part of that experience, I try to forget a little because it was not without some
Well,
contention at the time. But
yeah,
that's
that's
that's New York State politics, right?
right.
But as you know, I served in the state
Yes.
legislature for 2 decades. It was a real privilege. So when I didn't get elected to town office, I did get elected to the state assembly, and part of that tenure, by the way, was chairing the local governments committee. So I really did have the chance to uh, have an even closer relationship with our local government officials from across the state. So my predecessor, for various unfortunate reasons, had to resign.
Yes.
So under the state constitution, when there's a vacancy in the office of state controller or attorney general, and this has happened a couple of times over the years for both positions, the state legislature meets as a unicameral body, Senate and Assembly. Other than appointing boards of regents, I think it's the only time that there's ever a joint meeting of Senate and Assembly where every member has one vote. They vote together as one body. So it was a process, and I'd like to think, partially because I'd been a member of the legislature for a long time, people knew me, had worked with me, and again, to restore the integrity and reputation of the office, I think most of the senators and assembly members felt comfortable with someone who they knew and felt they could trust, because that was a real challenge when I first got appointed, to have people start to believe again in the credibility of the office. And we've worked very hard to achieve that by staying focused on what our responsibilities are.
Mhm.
Controller's job is one that a lot of folks don't always fully appreciate what it is we do. Not always on the front page of the papers, but we are so fundamental to the basic operations of state government, and obviously have a key role with local governments. So I've always tried very hard to keep in mind that legislators uh, put confidence in me at a time where they had other choices and other people they could have supported. The governor at the time didn't want anybody from the legislature. That was part of the contention that happened at the time. So it was an unusual way to get there, but I've been blessed with a great team, and when we've gone before the voters in 2010, in 2014, in 2018, 2022, and looking forward to 2026, I've gotten contract
Oh,
extensions,
that's
and
great.
I hope to have another one. We'll see how it all goes. Politics is kind of interesting these days,
Yeah.
as your elected town colleagues can understand. But for me, who's always had the aspiration to be in public service, this has been a wonderful opportunity. What a lot of people don't realize, I actually spent 10 years in the private sector.
Oh,
Everybody thinks I was always,
yeah.
just in government. And I worked for a little corporation called AT&T. And I enjoyed the corporate world, and I went to night school, got a degree in master's degree in management. And I was kind of starting to move up the management rung in the corporation. But for me, fulfillment came through community service, and I always wanted to be able to do government full time. So it's been a privilege. It was a privilege to serve in the state legislature. Continues to be a privilege to serve as state controller.
That's great. I think you were an assembly member when I worked in as a young staffer back in 2000, 1999, 2000.
Oh, sure. I
2000.
was still there. Yeah.
Yeah.
Where did you work?
So I worked for minority central staff.
Uh-huh.
John Faso was the
Oh,
minority
sure.
leader at the time.
John Faso and I were both elected in 1986. We were in the same
Okay.
class that year.
Yeah,
Yeah.
it's John, and then it went to Nesbitt,
Right.
and then it went to Flanagan,
Right.
and then he went to the Senate.
Right. There were a lot of
Yeah.
changes. Yeah.
Yeah. So,
John Flanagan and I were together in that class also.
oh
In that
really?
1986 class. Yeah, a
That,
lot of folks were there.
that's
Yeah.
like that.
Of course, when I came in, Rap Rapelier was the minority leader, and he was
Oh yeah,
a legend
yeah,
from Norwich, upstate New York. Yeah.
that class had a lot of stars in it. It's like that quarterback class that Kelly and Marino and everybody came out of.
Yeah.
That was a big
Yes.
class.
Yeah. Yeah.
So we touched on a little bit, Comptroller, but what are some of the things that a town would interact aside from audits? What would they interact with your office on, or what would they turn to your office for resources regarding outside of an audit?
Well, I mean, you're picking up on what we touched on. We really focus on the training aspect. So especially for for new officials, let's say someone's a newly elected supervisor or a town board member, and they're not sure an issue comes up. Let's say a legal issue, right? Uh, traditionally the control's office had issued formal opinions. We do a little less of that
Hmm.
recently, but we do some of that. What we do a great deal of, though, is provide informal guidance and counsel.
Hmm.
So, certainly in terms of legal services, opportunity there for collaboration. There are certain issues that may come up that involve a town, for instance, extension of sewer lines that may
Yeah.
involve a town. We play a role in that.
Yeah.
Um, sometimes there may be an issue of alienation of state property or transferring it to a town.
Hmm.
A lot of this does involve some of the legal kind of questions. So that's certainly one area. I would say the other big area where we would encourage people to be in touch with us. We're always very big on the issue of long-term financial planning.
Hmm.
So we've created toolkits and webinars and training opportunities to really have people focus on that issue of how not just to balance a budget in the short term, but what are some of the steps you need to take for that long-term budget balance. And then, of course, we collect data, right? So we do our annual fiscal stress monitoring.
Yes.
That's something we put in place back with the financial crisis of, what was 12 years ago, whenever it was, because, across the country, you saw municipalities facing bankruptcy. So we really set it up as an early warning system. So we take the data that's submitted to us by towns and other municipalities and school districts, and then we have a scoring, a very clear set of objective criteria. So I mention this because one of the issues we've had is that we can only go by the data that's submitted to us.
Mm.
So I really want to encourage your members to please, please, please don't ignore the responsibility to file that annual financial report. What we've seen, unfortunately, is that over the years, more and more municipalities are either submitting the reports late or not doing it at all.
Right.
Look, there's no real penalty, but it does raise a concern. If you're not, filing this information, number one, for your own constituents, they're not going to be able to see what's going on. And for an entity like the controller's office, getting back to the audit function, if we see a pattern where we're just not getting the data, does that suggest that somebody doesn't want us to see things? So in most cases, I'm sure it's just with everything going on and all the pressures, it goes to the bottom of the pile. But that's important because when we get that information, then we could do the scoring. And the fiscal stress monitoring is really an opportunity for a town to see how they score.
Mm.
Maybe we're going to show something that folks might not have been aware of. It's meant, first of all, to help the town board members and the local financial people, but also to help citizens, see how their municipality is doing. So those are some of the other ways that people may think of our office and want to be involved. I always want to say, yeah, and I'm glad the way you phrased the question. We have that audit responsibility, but we really are meant first and foremost to be a resource. So anything, any municipal question, anything particularly on financial planning. We also get questions sometimes on issues related to ethics, right?
Oh, yeah.
Many of the towns maybe want to update their code of ethics, and they look to us. What have you been seeing in terms of what other municipalities are doing? What might be some of the good standards for us to incorporate in a local code of ethics? So a lot of ways that we could be helpful and provide guidance.
On that audited financial statement issue, the association has been trying to work, I think, in conjunction with your office on
Yeah.
trying to get more compliance on
Right.
that and making sure people understand how important it is.
Yeah.
So we'll continue that good work. I'm hoping we see a bump in folks. Do you think that, and this is probably just speculation, but do you
Yeah.
think COVID had anything to do with it, where things kind of slowed down a little bit and then coming back, people might have
I
forgotten?
think I think it's a good point. It's hard to prove it, but I think a lot of things, you know, got disrupted
Yeah.
by the COVID experience, and getting back up and running. There's so many other pressures going on
Yeah.
right now, and sometimes people, feel, one more report. But it's really easy to do now, right? You do electronically and
Yeah.
everything. We really try to make it simple. And, one big area I should have mentioned, you should have prodded me, the retirement system.
Oh, that was next on my question.
That's a
That was my
big way
next
that we
question.
interact. That's a very, very important part, both for your members who have a salary, right, and are members of the system, but also for your members who are employers, right?
Yep.
The retirement system is very important as far as budgets, because depending on
Right.
what the bill we send as far as employer contribution, that has an impact on local budgets. So yeah, that's another very big area in terms of our relationship with all municipalities.
It's funny, you're very good at this because you anticipated each case, the next question. And so it was going to be about how important the retirement system is to every town official.
Yeah.
So everyone was going to listen to that. But I also wanted to talk about two things. One, if you wouldn't mind explaining how you get to the bill that actually gets sent to local government, because it's all about one day, if I remember this correctly.
Yeah, that's one of the challenges. Yeah, yeah, it's a good point. So, well, it's all about one day and other factors.
Okay.
So the one day is the point that we value the fund on a certain day, under the requirements of New York State. As you well know, the state fiscal year ends on March 31st, which is kind of an unusual date.
Yep.
I think we're the only state that has that date.
Probably.
The history has been explained to me. It's never been quite clear. Most states are either on a calendar year or, July 1st. I think some are maybe June 1st. So our retirement system is tied to the state fiscal year, different than the state teachers' retirement system or the five New York City plans that are on a June 30th valuation date. So that March 31st date is when pencils are down. We get the audited financial statement as to what the value of the fund is and what the performance has been for the previous year. That is an important factor that goes into the calculation for the bill that we send the employers. But it's not the only factor. So the way the process works, the books are closed on March 31st. We then, usually takes a couple of months to get the final numbers. And then our actuary takes the investment performance and then also evaluates all the demographics of the profile of the retirement system. So you look at things like mortality rate. And obviously during COVID, there was an impact there. The rate or frequency of people retiring. And again, COVID, we saw a big uptick in retirements, right? Particularly with police and fire. So keep in mind with the pension fund, although we talk about the pension fund, most employees are in the employees' retirement system. Probably most of the town employees are. But then for those that are in police and fire, it's about 5 or 6% of the total census of employees. But those pensions are more costly because the benefit structure is different, and sometimes the characteristics of the behavior of when people retire, it's been a little different. Police and fire generally more likely that when they hit that mark to get a pension, they'll go. ERS side, people tend to hang in there a little longer. Again, some disruptions from COVID. But so the actuary has to look at that. And then it also has to look at, are there any changes in benefit structure? So we administer the pension fund. We do the investing of the money that the employers contribute, the employees contribute. We then invest the money, and you go back over the past, whatever, 2 decades, 70% or so of how we pay for the pensions is from the investment return.
Yep.
It's not just from employer contributions or employee contributions. Employee contributions have been going up because of changes, but still only about 2%. And as you know, not that long ago, because there was a lot of concern about issues with recruitment and retention, modification to Tier 6,
Yep.
right? And your members are familiar with the tiers and how it's set up. And there's continued pressure for more enhancement to Tier 6. Many of our retirees would like to see a COLA increase, the cost of living adjustment for retirees, which, the tier system, the COLA, it's all done by New York State statute. So what our actuary has to look at is, okay, what was our investment return? What's the mortality rate? Are folks living longer? And they have been. Good news, right?
Yep.
Putting the COVID experience aside for the moment. And what has the legislature and the governor done as far as any changes as far as benefit enhancement? So he takes all of that and then comes up with a calculation, an actuarial report that then is reviewed by an independent actuarial advisory committee. And that meeting typically takes place in August. That's already concluded. And the committee gave a favorable review. They don't formally approve it, but they gave a favorable review to what the actuary recommended. And then I sign off on it. And then that then translates into the contribution rate that we then send out to the employers. And there's always a lead time. It's like 2-year lead time, so you could plan for your budgeting process. So probably no surprise because of some of those changes that I mentioned, and the fact that those who are retiring more recently, obviously, are folks that are at a higher salary level than the folks who retired 10 years ago. The costs have been going up, so there is an increase in ERS and PF, police and fire as well. What we try to do is it's never a flat line, but we try to keep it as stable as possible. But, Chris, and you've heard me say this, my responsibility as trustee for the fund is to make sure it's well funded.
Right.
At the end of the day, what's important is not how big we are a big fund, but how much do we have in assets versus our liabilities? And we are always 90% funded. I think we're over 92% funded now. So for a public pension plan in the United States to be consistently in the 90s, some years we're at 100, that means we're able to provide retirement security to our over 1.2 million members. And it means that some of the negative financial fallout from states that have poorly funded pensions, we don't have that experience here. So I know sometimes when some of your members might say, why is the pension bill going up? Part of it is things that we don't control directly, like benefit enhancement, but part of it is I have to make sure the plan is staying well funded. Last thing I'll just mention is that we have a pretty conservative goal for our returns on the investment side. We have a long-term goal of 5.9% positive return, which I think we're one of only, I think now 2, maybe 3 states that are below 6% in the assumed rate of return, that conservative. But I think that positions us better. It means we don't have to go into more risky kind of investments. Our return for this March 31st, we kind of got hit in that mid-March to mid-April reaction to the tariff announcement where the markets went way down. So we had a 5.84 return, so just shy of the 5.9, but already, for the first quarter of the new fiscal year, we were over a 5% return just for that quarter. So I'm confident because there's a lot of uncertainty with the markets right now. We all know that, but I do have confidence in our asset allocation is going to keep us well positioned for today and for the future.
Well, I have to say, I think you are doing a tremendous job on making sure that that's a safe, well-funded fund. I've sat through briefings and been to your office on briefings, and just very impressive at how well you actually keep that fund.
And we try to communicate. I mean, you mentioned the advisory council, and I'm pleased you sit on it because we try to bring all the stakeholders together to understand exactly what we're dealing with. And I always try to remind people as well. We have a very professional staff that manages the investment side. We have an independent investment advisory committee that helps guide us on our strategic plans. We have a real estate committee that signs off on real estate investments. So sometimes people say, "Oh, the controller is the trustee. He's making all these decisions all by himself." No, no. We have a very elaborate process, very professional process, and we are very transparent with stakeholders, with the public as to what we're doing. And I know sometimes it gets a little complex, but we're always there to try to make people understand very clearly what it is we're doing and
Yeah.
how we're doing it.
Getting back to that tier 6 issue,
Yeah.
there's no issue, I believe, in our legislative agenda that has divided people more
Mm,
than enhancements
yeah.
to tier 6, because the municipal associations drove for tier 6 to get off of tier 4, obviously for cost savings, right? But I think what a lot of towns found in particular is that it became harder for workforce development,
Yeah.
and it became a lot less attractive. And so all of a sudden we've had, and not just that, I mean, obviously we've talked about COVID a few times, that created a workforce development issue,
Yeah.
all the retirees going at once. There's a real workforce development issue in municipal work right now. And we're just not seeing some of the younger people coming out wanting to get involved in it for whatever reason, maybe because the pay scale is a little bit lower, could not keep up with the inflation of wages during COVID. The public sector just couldn't keep up with the private sector. But we have advocated for enhancements to tier 6 in order to help try to attract more people into that work. But our membership is not a single mind on that
Yeah.
because of the cost savings it
Right.
did provide. So
Right.
it's very interesting.
But there's going to be more pressure moving forward. There's
Yeah.
no doubt about it. I mean, part of the dynamic is you now have, I think it's a little over 60% on police and fire, and more than that of the membership now is tier 6.
Yeah.
So people don't realize there has been a big turnover.
Yeah.
And I think, from the employee perspective, the union perspective, there's a lot more pressure. You're working beside someone who's tier 4. I'm tier 4, saying, well, gee, I don't have those benefits. I think the other challenge with what you're touching on, because we see it in our agency, we've had issues with recruitment as well. A lot of the younger folks, first question they ask is, what percent of their work is remote?
Yes.
Another fallout from COVID where we had to be remote. Well, to me, it makes a difference whether you're remote all the time or you're in the office.
Right.
We're trying to encourage more people to be back in the office and try to work that out with our unions.
Yeah.
But, unfortunately for a lot of folks who came of age to enter the workforce during COVID, that they put a premium on the remote work.
Yes.
Not so much on getting a pension or health
Right.
insurance,
Right.
which as you get older, you're going to realize how important those things are. So I think that's a challenge that even some private sector is working. But some of the government jobs, and I'm sure for many of your town members, they don't lend themselves to being 100% remote.
Absolutely not.
Absolutely not. It's hands-on. So
Yeah.
I think it's a challenge we're all facing. So look, at the end of the day, as I said, we don't control that, and if there will be more enhancement, I'll be direct. And I say this to my friends on the union side as well as the employer side. Whatever is worked out, my goal is going to be to keep the plan well funded.
Yeah.
So sometimes people say, well, can't you maybe, don't have it quite so well funded? No, because if we come up to another global financial crisis, or even COVID, which fortunately did not drive down returns too bad for too long, but it's those unexpected events. And if you are poorly funded as a pension plan, and this is what happens in other states, if you don't keep your plan well funded during the good times, when the bad times happen,
Yeah.
you never get out from under it.
Right.
And in the most extreme example, it happened in one of our neighboring states. They actually changed from a fully defined benefit retirement plan to a hybrid defined contribution defined benefit. I don't want to see us abandon the defined benefit. I think it's the only sure way to have retirement security. As someone who came from the private sector, I think it's unfortunate the private sector has moved way off of it. This is still one of the big advantages of choosing a career in government. And I think that's something we collectively at the local level and the state level need to remind prospective employees. You may not be thinking of it when you're 20, but as you get older,
Right.
knowing that you have a pension at the other end, even more important. So that retirement security issue is a big one in our country right now.
I tell you, bring up an issue that I think we could have a whole podcast on separately, the work at home or work in office debate. And it goes on. And I just came from meeting with somebody, and that they asked me, picking my brain because of what they do where they are,
Yeah.
and there's pressure to go. But I see the trend coming back to the office more than not. But a lot of younger folks still in particular, as you say, want that work at home. And it's just sometimes towns in particular, they're frontline people,
Absolutely.
you can't do that.
Absolutely.
So it is definitely difficult, but um, those are issues that our towns are facing and states facing. And I think the state has addressed I know that a workforce issue problem, but then I think they've addressed some of that where I've heard their hiring is up back a little
Well, it's
bit.
interesting. So one of the things that was done, I think it goes on for another year. They have something called New York Helps, which
Yes.
is an initiative that basically suspends the normal civil service
Yep.
route because the tests aren't always given, and the lists are old. Something that I'm sure you hear at the local level as
Yes.
well. So this is a way, if people have the minimum qualifications, we can get people in. So actually, our agency, we've hired. I forgot the last number, but I think it's been at least 500 people
Oh,
come in.
wow.
No, it's big impact.
Yeah.
We were very short-staffed, especially retirement as an example.
Mhm.
Call center wait times were up, because we didn't have enough employees, and we're still a little bit short on our fill. But that initiative has made a big difference. It was worked out cooperatively with the unions, but it's been a very positive development
Yeah.
for the state
Yeah.
workforce.
It's a big issue, and it's one we're going to look at in 2026 again on our legislative agenda. We
Yeah.
have some ideas that might be able to help. Getting back to the audit for a moment, because that's one of your key roles, and we talked about it a little bit. But if a town is, let's say, picked or called for an audit, can you talk a little bit about why that might be? Because some people automatically assume, like the IRS, oh, I did something wrong
Right,
right off the bat.
right.
But how do you go about deciding on how audits are
Yeah,
done? And then what should the town expect? Because a lot of them get nervous, obviously.
sure.
What should they expect in the process?
Yeah, it's a good question. And it's interesting the way you phrased it in terms of getting picked. I have to say, it's not unusual for a town to ask us to come in and audit,
Interesting.
especially when there's a change let's say, there's a new supervisor,
Yep.
especially if there might have been a contentious local political development. Very often, the new person comes and say, "Hey, I would like an audit to
Yeah.
see what was maybe could be done better during my tenure." So there are different ways. What's the latest number on towns? 800 and something towns we have?
933
Excuse me,
towns.
930.
Yeah.
So needless to say, we can't be in every town every year. So, and then we're just talking about towns,
Right.
but we have
Right.
counties, we have cities, we have
think
villages, we have
there's
special districts, we have local authorities.
1,600 municipalities, I believe,
Yeah,
somewhere in that area.
yeah, it's a lot, and all the school districts, obviously.
Yeah.
So,
Yeah.
so we have to set certain priorities and parameters. So we have regional offices all across the state, and that's where the local government auditors are housed. And they develop local audit plans. They come up with a schedule.
Mhm.
And they would look at a town from various perspectives. One criteria they may look at is, have we been in there lately, or has it been many years? Um, Again, because our local auditors are based locally, they read the local newspapers.
Mm.
Is there an issue maybe that popped up that
Interesting. Yeah.
sparks an interest? Um, as I said, we will often get a request from a local official, and some of those can be a little tricky because sometimes there's local politics. We don't want to get involved with that. So we don't. I always say to folks, we're not there to settle local disputes or local election issues. That's not our role. But there are sometimes legitimate issues that are raised. And then, of course, citizens will often call, and they could report any issue where they may think, most of the audits are focused on efficiency, but sometimes it's focused on, things that raise issue of, not being lawful
Yep.
or worse.
Yep.
Um, so we do have people have the ability to call into us, to email, even anonymously, if they think something's untoward going on. So what really happens is our auditors at the field level take all this information in, or sometimes I should also say, we may get a request from a state legislator
Mhm.
saying, in my district, I've been hearing of something. I'd like you to look at town X, Y, or Z. So all these different inputs come in, and then the local government through the local office, and they get sign off from Robin, who's the head of the division, and everyone else. They come up with a schedule of audits. So there's really not one way that a town may be identified. There are many different ways, but certainly, to the point of your question, uh, people shouldn't react by saying, "Oh my God, they're onto something."
Right.
It's as often as not that it's just, hey, we haven't been there for a while.
Yeah.
Important for us to come look. And I really have to say, in terms of the end of the process, even when we have findings, it really is, in the overwhelming majority of cases, in the spirit of this is what you could do a little better
Yep.
and improvement. And I think it always makes a difference when the entity that we're auditing, the town that we're auditing, um, embraces and says,
Yeah.
"Okay, I'll learn from it." Because sometimes I think folks automatically say, "Well, I have to be very defensive about it."
Yeah.
Sometimes I think folks are a little too defensive. Maybe read more into it than's actually there. And so I always say, take it in the spirit that it's sort of doesn't mean there aren't some audits that aren't contentious,
Right.
and there may be a disagreement. And as you know, as part of the audit process, once a town is identified, there's then a risk assessment, there's then field work. Uh, the risk assessment would look at, well, what exactly? We're not going to look at every single thing in the
Right.
town. What part of the operation or the finances are we going to look at? So you narrow the focus. The field work is done. Preliminary findings are developed. The town would then get a copy of what the findings are before they're finalized. So the town would have a chance to say, wait a minute, you didn't get that right. You didn't look at this piece of paper or this bit of information. And our auditors can then change those findings. And then a final audit report is delivered. And the town then has a chance to see the final report. And if there still is a disagreement, the town is entitled to write out what the differences are. And the final audit report will include not only what our auditors have found, but what the town is saying as well. So there's no, not trying to hide anything.
Right.
Everybody will see, this is what the controls office recommended. This is how the town reacted to it. I like it when the town writes back and says, we appreciate, what was said, and we're going to implement, because you're supposed to have a corrective action
Yep.
plan if there are some findings. But that's all out there.
Yep.
We're not trying to, hide anything or treat anybody unfairly, or not give multiple opportunities for, if there is any response or a different point of view, for that to be out there and for the public to see. What the town should expect, though, is professional behavior, courtesy.
Mhm.
And I would say to your members, or if you hear of anything, and it doesn't happen often, I can't say it's never happened, but it ever happens that one of our auditors comes in and a town feels they're not being treated with respect or professionalism, you got to let me know.
Yep.
And we'll get on top of it, because that's the standard that I expect
Yeah.
from our people.
Yeah, no, it's great. We chatted about this before. As a supervisor, been through one of the audits, and we came out great. So it was a fine experience. But it is such an important role. People forget. I think people forget that it's taxpayer money. It's
Yeah.
public money, and you need somebody watching that, and it's so important. I think where it falls down, unfortunately, is nothing to do with you or your office. It's some people weaponize these
Yeah.
returns and go after them politically, and
Right.
we've dealt with that in the past.
Right.
But and that's unfortunate. But
Well, that's sort of, sometimes I'll get a call from, you audited us, and did you see that what was put
yeah,
in the paper? And I would say, well, we don't write the newspaper
right,
articles. And if somebody, takes something and puts a terrible headline or takes something out of context, I mean, I feel bad, but I'm not responsible for that, which is why sometimes when people read an audit, even if it may be an audit that may have some serious findings in it, it's very much written in very
yeah.
straight auditor
Yeah,
language.
it always seems to be very balanced and fair.
Yeah.
It's what, and Tom, there's a whole nother podcast we can go on, is Facebook posts
Well,
about
that's a
what
whole
people do on Facebook, but that's a whole nother story.
Well,
And-
but it's, our folks will look at the social media also.
yeah,
I mean, that's the times that we're in. So that might we pick something up on that as well?
yeah.
Possibly, yeah.
We are seeing not just workforce development issues, but we're seeing people choosing not to run for local office
Mm.
anymore. It's so hard to find people who want to run, and this is a whole other topic, and it's just gonna diverge for a moment. But one of the issues is that people get so beat up on social media now that who wants to do this in the community
Yeah.
for $8,000 a year or whatever they're getting paid to
Yeah.
serve? It's really a public service to run for local office. I believe that wholly. But I think that the way things have gotten now on Facebook, and other social media, it's just chased so many good people out, unfortunately.
And I think a lot of folks, I could be wrong, they might have the stomach for it, but people are very concerned about their families,
Yes,
especially if you have
yes,
children.
yes.
You know, it's one thing if you're attacking me, but you know, if you think my kid's going to go to school and some other kid's going to say something because something that somebody posted, I think people feel they want to be protective
Yeah.
of their
Oh,
families, and because it is a sacrifice, but I think it's one that people are willing to do, but it is becoming more difficult because we live in such a polarized time.
yeah,
It's really, I mean, I feel it, you know,
yeah,
when I'm out there. I mean, I've been doing it for so long. My skin is a little tough at this point,
yeah.
but I've always said also from my experience running for town office and being on a school board, you know, people sometimes say, "How do you keep doing, you know, politics at the state level?" I say, "Come on, I was on a school board for 10 years. This
That's
is a
the
piece of cake.
hardest.
This is a
School
piece of
board
cake."
is the hardest.
School was hard, but town also because you can't hide. You're right there. You know, you're at the supermarket.
That's true.
People know, people find you, and if they see you, they got a bone to pick. They're gonna come right
Oh
up to you. You
yeah,
can't hide.
yeah,
You know, I mean, that's the plus and the minus of local government service. But
yeah.
in a more contentious time, it does become more difficult. It really does. So I really, you know, salute your members, you know, that do serve and are willing to serve, because it is a lot harder. And of course, you know, so many of the town officials that you support, you know, are appointed as well,
Right.
and they're very often the unsung heroes
Yes. Yeah.
in the work they do to administer the services at the town level. So, you know, I always say to folks, and again, I've been doing it for a while. There, at the end of the day, even with all the challenges, there's nothing more rewarding than public service. And I always try to say to young people, they say, "Well, you know, do I want to make more money in private sector? Do I want to go to government?" I say, "You know what? You can't put a price tag on the satisfaction when you can make a difference for your community." And not that elective service is the only way to do it, but it's a very unique way to do it. And for me, on balance, it continues to be a very rewarding experience. And I hope that with the example that you set and your colleagues set, that people will understand we're going through a crazy phase right now, but so important to stand up. If you don't want to run for town office, there's so many other ways to be involved. Local committees,
Yeah.
you know, the towns have, you know, board of zoning and
Yes.
appeals and ethics board and, you know, all kinds of other, you know, citizen, you know, roles to play in a town. Uh, you know, that's the way to get involved and make a difference as
Yeah.
well.
Yeah. You've been so gracious with your time, and I've kept you longer than I told you I would. But there's still one more question I wanted to get to because I know our members are so. This is so top of mind on our members, especially right now, budget time going on. Is kind of get your thoughts. Is that affecting you? That's not affecting you. Okay. Just want to get back to that. Just to get your thoughts on the tax cap. As you know, that it's obviously a legislative matter, but I think everyone has to file their cap with your office. Um, we have, for some time, been advocating to try to get a little fairer for towns. You know, I don't know why the pilots have to be subtracted out, all that kind of stuff. But just your thoughts on how are towns doing with staying under their tax cap? How do they file? I know the form, and we don't have to get into the formula
Yeah,
because that's
right.
but the formula is tough for some towns to figure out.
Well, and we're there to explain it, right? So you're right. Under the law, we didn't impose a tax cap. It's a
Right.
legislative requirement, but we are the ones to make sure there's compliance. So it has to be filed with us. We review to make sure that it's being adhered to. We always provide training and information if there's any question about calculating. And then, of course, if you want to exceed the cap, we have to make sure the appropriate resolution is
Yes.
passed to do that. Look, when I've gone to the various meetings of towns and the other municipalities, there is I think a heightened level of hope that there'll be more flexibility
Mhm.
built into the cap. Again, it's a legislative prerogative, so you know I'll leave that up to the discussions with the senators and assembly members. I think there's been a bit more openness.
Mhm.
Let's just say under prior administrations there was no openness to this issue, but I think the cost pressures, inflation. I mean, the towns are not immune from that.
Yeah.
Increased costs of pensions, you know, you know, and the fact that, you know, for New York State, while our budget was a very generous one this year, and even with some of the challenges, seems to be holding together. as you know, because you've read what we've been putting out, next year's budget process is going to be much more difficult.
Yeah.
You know, even before you look at the restructuring of the federal-state relationship, we have out-year budget gaps that accumulate to about $34
Mm.
billion. That doesn't even factor in, you know, the cuts in Medicaid and healthcare and nutrition and so on. And we're still trying to figure out what the full impact of those cuts will be. So if the state has a budget crunch, that will translate into an
Absolutely.
impact because much of the state budget is passed on to local governments,
Correct.
right? So anywhere 35 to 40% of the state budget is federal money. Much of the state budget gets passed down to localities, certainly school districts particularly. So if the state is having less money and if this economy doesn't stay strong, you know, in terms of the impact as far as the programs that towns depend on in terms of state support, you may not see as generous levels of funding from the state level that you've seen in the past, which will put even more pressure to live within the cap. So I think, you know, what I would say is this, because again, it's a legislative prerogative, keep it as one of your priorities, be thoughtful about, I would say, not over asking. I always say that as one who was in the legislature, don't over ask.
Yeah.
Ask for something appropriate to give you a little more flexibility, because I do think even the state legislators are going to realize it's going to be a more difficult budget climate, certainly for the state, for our local
Yeah.
governments as well, including the towns.
Yeah, we're getting prepared for that. It's going to be a challenge,
Yeah.
unfortunately. And I know a lot of towns, I've talked to them this budget year, it's just a tough budget for them for some reason. But we are seeing more, not a lot, but we're seeing more towns go over the cap than
Yeah.
what the appetite seems to be greater now than it has been when it first came out. I was a young new supervisor when it first came out, and we thought we were doing our due diligence. I'll just tell you this quick story, doing our due diligence by passing that resolution that would give us the flexibility if we needed it.
Right.
But you have to do that so early, you're not
Right.
sure you need it.
That's right. Right.
Oh my goodness, they came out with pitchforks
really?
because they thought we were going to like immediately
Right.
just override it.
Right.
And we had to explain to them, we're just trying to get in position in case.
Right.
But
the overwhelming majority of towns and municipalities
oh yeah,
comply with it.
yes,
And even in terms of, I mentioned fiscal stress before, the number of towns that end up in fiscal stress, very low compared to other
Yeah,
levels.
yeah.
So that's to the credit of what you know, the towns are doing. But you know, the pressures are real, and that they're, and you always have to remind people, uh, you know, when you look at your property tax bill, you know, the percent of town tax.
Oh.
You know, I live on Long Island, which is obviously a high tax area.
Yeah.
But the town taxes are not what's driving the
Correct.
tax bill.
In most parts of the state, it's 10 cents on the
Yeah.
total dollar.
Right.
Yeah.
Right.
I
So that
just got-
becomes an education factor too, right? So how many times, you know, town officials or county officials are getting beat up,
Right.
and when they, you know, and they have to explain, well, we're not responsible for the
Right.
for the school to, you know.
Well, because most towns collect,
Yeah.
they do the collection.
course,
Everyone
yeah.
thinks that's going to the
Yeah.
town.
Yeah.
But I got my school tax bill yesterday, and I didn't have gray hair before I opened that envelope. And this all came after that. Nick knows, he's laughing. He knows I had gray hair, but that was a tough bill. I don't know what happened.
Well, but you know, our schools are still, to me, such an, and I don't say this just because I was a school board member in graduate public schools, such an important investment, and the state has really stepped up in terms of support. But I think for people at the local level, you know, I do see it. You know, I saw it in Nassau County over the years I was involved. Very often, the you know, the towns in the county and the villages will get some of the flack when it's not really their part of the
Right.
property tax
Right,
budget.
right.
But you're right. The town official that people know even more than the supervisor is the receiver of taxes. You know how to spell their name for sure.
That's right. That's right. So that's funny. As I said, I've kept you longer. Anything that you want to add that we haven't covered yet?
Well, we covered so much. I really just hope that the biggest takeaway is that your members understand we are really there to be helpful in any way that we can. And I want to, Chris, express my appreciation to you for the partnership with our office.
Thank you.
It's always been great with the association going back to all these years, but you've stepped it up, and I really appreciate that. And to your members, especially the elected members, thank you for the public service. I know it's not easy, but from where I sit, you know, the people who serve in our towns are great people. They do great work. And you said it before, frontline, essential to providing services at the local level. I see it every day back home. And I just say thank you
Well,
for the
thank
great
you.
public service.
And thank you to you as well. I mean, you do a tremendous service for the state. You've been a wonderful advocate for local governments. You've been a wonderful advocate for the pension fund and for keeping that solid, and all your great work, and for all you do for coming to our meetings and helping us with training. I just really appreciate that as well. So,
I'll be there in
and
February. I hope we
good.
see all of your members there. You just got to
Thank
tell me
you.
the day and time, and I'll.
Yeah. And I want to thank you for watching as well. As always, like, share, and subscribe. Next podcast we have of another very interesting one. We're going to be talking to Senator Hinchy. So you're going to want to see that one because we're going to be talking about some of the issues we talked about here at the Comptroller, investments in water and infrastructure and the SWAP program, and what towns need to do to make sure that we have proper investments in those infrastructure.